Greetings and blessings. My name is James Devitt. I'm the founder of Blue Star Spiritual Group. We have our online group, which is The Way Spiritual Philosophy on Facebook. We've also started Blue Star Readings, which I am doing guidance scrolls. The guidance scrolls are a combination of your life path, personal year coming up, 3 guides and 3 past lives, along with a reading of the potentials at this time. Today starts a new chapter, if you will. Today starts Blue Star Channeling with Tobin of the Pleadian High Council. I wanted to do an introductory video first to introduce myself and to kind of tell everybody what my background is in the spiritual philosophies here on planet Earth. Here, my journey began back in the United States. I was born in Los Angeles, raised in Oklahoma. I was raised as a Christian. However, at the age of 13, I had my first close encounter with extraterrestrials, shall we say. They took a picture that I had drawn, and it was, what I discovered later on was it was more along the lines of saying, yes, what you saw was real, and you're a part of this. And then nothing. Until I was 18, and at 18, things kind of conspired to get me to leave Christianity, which I then left Christianity. And yet I didn't change my beliefs as far as my belief in God, my belief in Jesus and things of this nature. What I did change was going to a religious church. I stayed away from religion for several years, for approximately 4 years until 1986. And in 1986, this is when my life began to really change. I was living in Long Beach, California. My grandparents and my mother were living in Oklahoma City. I worked for the airlines. I worked in reservations. And on 4 separate occasions, in my family, I grew up with my grandparents, my mother, and my sister. The only one I was ever really close to was my grandmother, and we had a bond that went beyond words, went beyond everything else. And on 4 separate occasions, I would call home. My grandparents had quite a few health problems, but my mom would answer the phone, and I'd be completely freaked out. What's wrong with Grandma? What's wrong with her? How's she doing? And every time, everything was fine. I talked to my grandmother. Everything seemed normal and everything fine. Well, the last time this happened was around the 1st of November of 1986. It was a Friday evening. And same story. Everything's fine. I talked to my grandmother. Everything seemed normal. Nothing out of place. However, a week later on Friday at work, my mom called and informed me that my grandmother had fallen and broken her hip. And she said that she was coming off the respirator. Everything was fine. She was looking really good. And so I asked my mom, I said, do you want me to come home? And she said, no, everything was fine. When I got off the phone, I explained to my supervisor what was going on. She asked if I wanted an emergency pass to go home, and I said no. About 15 minutes later, I was back in her office going, I have to have that pass to go home. And she said, okay, you'll get it on Monday. Book yourself on a flight Tuesday morning. So I booked myself to leave Long Beach at 7:50 Tuesday morning. I would then fly out of Dallas at 1 o'clock, arriving in Oklahoma City about 1:30. The flights weren't very full. I was flying standby, so everything was fine. The next day on Saturday, it was around lunchtime. I had just come back from lunch. I was at work. And I was really upset, really angry, upset. I knew something was wrong. I didn't know with who, I didn't know with what. I just knew something was wrong. So I decided to just sit back, and soon, about a half an hour later, it kind of dissipated and went away. Monday comes, I get my tickets, and about an hour later the supervisor comes out and says, got a question. Did you apply for the ticket counter position in Minneapolis? And I said, yes, I did. She said, I'm really sorry, but that interview is tomorrow morning at 9. So I thought, no problem, I'll be there. So I told her, I'll sort it out. I rebooked my flights to leaving Long Beach at 10:50 in the morning, arriving in Oklahoma City about 6, and then on an American flight at 6:30, which would have arrived in Oklahoma City at 7. I got up at 4 in the morning and walked to work and went through the interview, went to the airport, got on the plane, and we went to Vegas and then to Dallas. And I found out in Dallas I almost got bumped in Vegas, which would have been a nightmare. Fortunately, I'm in Dallas, but I get bumped off the next 2 American flights. Now, I've told my mother that I'm flying standby, so as soon as I arrive in Oklahoma City, I'll call her. She can come pick me up at that point. I finally take the last seat on the 9 o'clock flight out of Dallas to Oklahoma City. It was very kind of not a great flight because I was sitting in the middle of a smoking section and there were plenty of smokers on there. But I arrived in Oklahoma City. All I had was a carry-on bag. So everyone that was on the flight was basically heading downstairs to the baggage claim. I'm walking up through the terminal. I'm all by myself. The airport's pretty empty because it's 9:30 at night. And I get to the front of the terminal and I walk through the entryway where the ticket counters are at the front of the airport, and I get stopped like I hit a brick wall. And there's nobody around me, and I hear clear as a bell in my head, look to your right. I'm tired. It's been a long day. I'm like, yeah, whatever. And I hear again, look to your right. So I put my bag down and I'm just kind of going over in my head, it's been really stressful. I'm trying to get home to see my grandmother. I've been up all day. I've gone through an interview. I've had all these problems with the flights. And for the 3rd time I hear, look to your right. So I said, fine. And I turned and I looked to my right, and lo and behold, there's my mother at the American ticket counter trying to find out what time I'm coming in. I decided I didn't want to know and I wasn't going to question, and I just went over and said hi, and off we went to the house. Said hello to my grandfather, and my mom and I headed to the hospital, Baptist Medical Center there in Oklahoma City. My grandmother was in a private room in ICU. I was informed by my mom on the way to the hospital that Saturday night fluid had built up around my grandmother's heart and she had a relapse. I figured out that was what had upset me so much Saturday at lunchtime. I knew something was wrong or something was going to happen. I just didn't know with what. And as of mid-morning Sunday morning, she'd responded to no one. This was really difficult for me because, like I said, she was the only one that I was really close to. She's what got me through being a teenager, basically. And so my mom says, go ahead and go on in by yourself, spend some time with her. And I walk in and her wrists are strapped down because she had inadvertently pulled her NG tube out twice. But I sat down on the bed and I took her hand in mine and I kind of breathed, and she opened her eyes and we talked. And it was the last time she ever spoke in this life, in her life. And she basically told me that she understood what was happening. She knew what was going on. Everything was fine. She was very well versed, knew what was going on. She made me promise her 2 things. One, that I'd make peace with my grandfather before he passed away, which I did do. I took care of him the last year of his life, and we did find that peace that we had never had. And 2, and more importantly, to stay on the path that I was starting. Unfortunately, I knew all about making peace with the grandfather. I had no idea what she meant by the path that I was starting, and she didn't tell me. After 4 days, I'm at the hospital. I'm getting ready to go to the airport to fly back to California, and my mom is just beside herself. She is so angry. She keeps saying, "I can just kick myself. I can just kick myself." And I finally calmed her down long enough to say, "All right, tell me what's wrong." And she said, "4 times you called home wanting to know what was wrong with your grandmother, and I missed it." I said, "What do you mean you missed it?" She said, "Every time you called wanting to know what was wrong with your grandmother, we had to rush to the hospital the next day. And the last time, at 8 o'clock the next morning, is when she fell and broke her hip." This is the first real experience I had of a psychic event, if you will. I went back out to California, and on the 30th of November of 1986, my grandmother passed away. Fast forward a month to Christmas Eve, 1986. Now, my best friend at the time, his name was Hal. As far as I knew, he worked at the same airline I did. I saw him numerous times in the reservation office, talking to the supervisors and team leads and things like this. But he didn't work in reservations. I couldn't really even tell you exactly what it was or how we met. It was like I'd always known him, and he was someone I could talk to, and just he was always there. And he suggested that my roommate Lexi and myself and him get together on Christmas Eve, have a little party, to kind of commiserate the fact that we couldn't be at home with our families. And I had made arrangements that at 5:30 in the morning, Christmas morning, a friend of mine who I worked with was going to come to my place, and I was going to give her a ride to the airport because she was one of the lucky ones getting to go home for Christmas and everything. And so it was about midnight. We'd been drinking and smoking some things we probably shouldn't have. And I could tell that Lexi was feeling pretty good, but Hal and I was like we weren't really doing anything. And as it continued on, it got to be 2 in the morning, and Lexi was pretty much bombed, but Hal and I weren't, and I had actually stopped drinking at this point because I knew that I had to take a friend of ours to the airport at 5:30 in the morning. So Lexi excuses himself to go upstairs, use the toilet and everything, make another drink. And so as soon as he stumbles away, Hal looks at me and says, "I need to speak to you. I've got something I need to tell you. Can we step out onto the back porch?" Now, our back porch was very small. You could probably fit about 10 people in it, standing up somewhat comfortably, but nobody could sit down. It was fairly small. 6-foot high fence. The porch light is on. And Hal starts hemming and hawing, and he's, kind of like those situations where you need to tell someone something, but you don't really know how they're going to react. That type of feeling. Finally, he says to me, he looks me dead in the eye and he says, "You don't come from this planet. You come from elsewhere." Which I responded with, "Yeah, okay." It was like being told a piece of truth, and it's true. And she, "Yeah, okay, what, no big deal." Right after this, Lexi comes outside. He's got a drink in his hand, and I have no idea what this meant at the time, but Hal looks at Lexi and says, "Lexi, you need to turn off the porch light because there's way too much energy out here." And of course, Lexi was pretty drunk at this point, so he didn't. And the next thing you know, the light bulb exploded. Hal didn't mention this at all the rest of the evening. But what ended up happening later on was I was thinking about it, and what really surprised me wasn't what he told me, it was my reaction to what he told me, which was, "Yeah, okay." At 5 o'clock in the morning, Lexi and Hal go upstairs to crash, and I wait for my friend who arrives at 5:30, and I take her to the airport. I get back to the house about 4:45, or 4:45 rather, 5:50, and I go upstairs, and Lexi is out cold, and Hal is gone. So I figured, he probably couldn't sleep and just left. And now this was 10 minutes of 6, Christmas morning, 1986. Now it is past the middle of May 2015, and to this day I have never seen Hal again. I've never spoken to him again, never saw him again, nothing. It was literally as though he appeared, made his presence known, simply to give me that one piece of information. I spoke to several of the supervisors at work who I had seen him speak to, and they had no idea who I was talking about. I spoke to Lexi. Lexi remembered Hal, but it was like it was almost like, it's no big deal. He's not around. I have no idea where he is. It doesn't matter. I don't care. It was the strangest thing. I honestly believe that Hal was not born into a life here, and did not die. He came to give me that message, and once he gave it to me, he left again. A few weeks later, I went back to Oklahoma for Christmas, middle of January of '87, and in the house there was a bar, and on one side is the kitchen, and on the other side of the bar is the dining room, and then to the left is the lounge room. And I was sitting at the bar reading a magazine. It was about 2 in the afternoon. My mom was at work. My grandfather was in his bedroom. And I looked up, and standing between the bar and the dining room table on the other side of the bar to where I was my grandmother, wearing the same type of flower dress she always used to wear, smiling. Didn't say anything. She just smiled at me. And that night and the next night on ABC in the States was the 2-part miniseries Out on a Limb by Shirley MacLaine, which was all about her spiritual search. And it was the first time I ever heard things like channeling and healing and energy work and things like this. I had some knowledge around UFOs and stuff, but the other real spiritual sides of it, I didn't. And I had gone back to Oklahoma in the middle of 1987, took care of my grandfather until he passed away in the middle of 1988. And then at the end of 1988, my mother and I moved to Washington State. And in the beginning of 1989, I met a lady named Diana in Tacoma, Washington. And over the course of the next year, we worked together on spiritual things. We would discuss things about healing and channeling and energy and all of these types of things. And we would work on doing readings with each other, meaning of colors and using crystals and stuff like this. Now in March of 1989, I attended my very first channeling session. A lady was channeling a being named Rajni. I couldn't tell you. I've only seen this woman once. I've only seen her channel Rajni once. It was this one time. Now, although I couldn't tell you exactly what what his topic of conversation was, what he said at the very beginning is what has stuck with me for all these years. He said, "Listen to what I say. I will speak only truth. However, do not take what I say as absolute truth, but rather discern within your heart. If it resonates within your heart, explore it, experience it, see where it leads you. If it doesn't resonate, put it on a shelf or throw it away. Don't judge it. Don't worry about it. If it is something that you require later on, it will come back around." That's very profound for me. Because in August of 1989, I began channeling. The first two beings I ever channeled were Archangel Raphael and Archangel Gabriel. There are beings that I've channeled for more than 20 years, and there are beings that I've channeled only once. I have, over the course of the last 15 years, I have channeled immense number of times. And I have channeled publicly in the United States, in Hawaii, in Australia, and here in New Zealand. But I haven't channeled publicly for a while because it's been waiting. Tobin from the Pleadian High Council, who I'm going to be channeling for publicly, came to me about a year and a half ago. And he would come in, usually like once every couple of months, to set the energy, set the intent. Initially, I didn't know that this was his plan. However, there's a saying that I learned back in like around 1990, 91. Confirmation is a wonderful tool. Things happen, something comes from somebody or somewhere that we don't expect, and it confirms what we've gotten, and that's really quite powerful. And here recently, just a couple of weeks ago, I was speaking to my son, who at the time was in Turkey. He's a DJ. He does amazing electronic music. I'm not a fan of electronic music, I will be very honest. I can listen to his all day. And he was explaining to me the importance of the fact that he does his music in 432 megahertz. And how that's connected with the pyramids in Egypt, how it's connected with the Pleiadians, and everything like this. Now, his music is quantum, to say the least. If you want to hear any of it, he has the fourth track on Saint of Sin, Liquid Light, an album that's on YouTube, iTunes, or you can, if you have SoundCloud, search After Image. It's amazing. But I was talking to him, and I said to him, he knows I channel. He doesn't know any of the beings that I channel because we've never really discussed it at length or anything. And I said to him, I said, well, you know, I'm just amazed at what you're bringing to music and to the planet and everything. But I'm doing something new as well. I'm starting. I'm going to be channeling on YouTube. And I'm going to be channeling a being named Tobin from the Pleadian High Council. So what does my son Zach say? Oh yeah, I know Tobin. I'm like, what do you mean you know Tobin? He goes, he came to me before I went overseas. He didn't go into what he and Tobin discussed or what Tobin did with him or anything. Zach is a very spiritual young man and is very in tune with the other side, as it were. So when I channel, I do normally channel with my eyes open. And I hope you enjoy. Please discern within your heart. Many blessings and peace and love.